Welcome to the Irish Occupational Therapy Podcast, hosted by me, Jen Trechek.
And me, Eavan Rutledge.
This podcast is dedicated to exploring the world of occupational therapy, sharing the latest research and techniques and providing insights into the many ways that occupational therapy can help people of all ages live more fulfilling and meaningful lives.
Whether you are a practicing occupational therapist, a student of occupational therapy, or simply curious about this fascinating field, this podcast is for you. We'll be interviewing experts in the field, sharing stories from the front lines of occupational therapy practice, and providing tips and advice for anyone looking to get the most out of their therapy.
So sit back, relax, and join us on this exciting journey into the world of occupational therapy in Ireland.
Today we have the honour of speaking with Eavan Rooney, a remarkable paediatric OT who has made a significant impact in her own community. Eavan's journey is one that embodies the spirit of dedication and innovation. Recognising a gap in services within her community, she took the initiative to set up her own OT clinic. As fate would have it, Eavan's second daughter was born with a physical disability, arthrogryphosis, placing her in the role of a user of the services of the disability team she worked in.
In addition to her impactful work in the field, Eavan is currently pursuing a PhD, focusing on the impact of digital devices on preschool children. In our interview with Eavan, we will have the opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of her journey as an OT entrepreneur, a parent of a child with a physical disability, and a researcher. We'll explore the challenges she's faced, the lessons she's learned, and the insights she's gained along the way.
Welcoming Eavan Rooney to the Irish Occupational Therapy Podcast. You are very welcome, Eavan.
Thank you, Eavan.
So tell us about how you chose occupational therapy as a profession and your early training and maybe the start of your career.
So I don't have the biggest inspirational story about becoming an OT. I can't say it was always a lifelong dream, but I did always dream of working with children. So I come from a really big family. I have 10 siblings, so I've been surrounded by kids all my life. I also come from a family of teachers. So my mum was principal of a primary school, and she always spoke so highly of OT. So OTs would frequently come in and out of the school, and she would always tell me about them and say, this would be a great job. And I didn't know loads about it outside of sort of the paediatric area. And then I was only 17 doing my Leaving Cert, and I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But knowing that I wanted to work with children, I just OT down, speech and language therapy, and teaching, really kind of just those. I can't even remember what else I put. And I remember I was open to the idea of leaving home. But if I got to study in Ireland, I would have chosen that. But I missed Trinity by 5 points. And as they say, I think everything happens for a reason. I then actually got offered PATS, and my poor mother, she laughs if she listens to this, because anything she asked me to do or would have told me to do as a teenager, I would have just done the opposite. So she was really encouraging me to go to St. Pat's and be a teacher and get to work with children and all the rest. But I was adamant that I was just going to do the opposite of what she told me to do. So I got offered OT in a few places, but at the time, my now husband graduated as an engineer, and he was starting a job in London. And I was like, oh gosh, this is a bit of maybe a romantic dream. But I went over to Oxford, got accepted to Oxford, and I started OT there. And it was a 3-year course. And I remember my parents dropping me to the airport, and they just said, listen, Eavan, if this doesn't work out, give it to Christmas, just come home. You're very young. I only turned 18. I was very young, and I went, and I never looked back. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was, it was so practically driven, the course. It was wonderful, and I got to spend so much time in London, and all my placements were there. Now I did my final year placement in Ireland in the team that I'm now in. It was just a wonderful experience, and I have such fond memories of it. And nothing changed sort of within the course in terms of my aspirations of working with children. So my final year was all about, my thesis was, I think I did it in DCD and visual motor skills, and I did the specialist pediatric module, and then I got a paediatric placement, and I sort of, I never really looked back. Then moved to London after I graduated, but I landed myself like the best jobs. Became a school-based OT for the National Autistic Society. Got to work, so the school I worked for was called the Sybil Elgar School, and it was the first school for autism in the world, and it was really at the forefront of everything sort of education based in terms of autism and best practices, and any kind of a lot of other schools around the world kind of setting up autism service and so on would come to visit us, and we had a wonderful multidisciplinary therapy team, great teachers, and yeah, that was the start of my sort of paediatric OT career. And like, I suppose in London as well, just it offers so much diversity in terms of the children that we got to work with, and so many different cultures, and it was it was great. And we
Was it a primary age school, or
so it was a school, yeah, so it was primary, secondary and further education, so it's children and young people aged 5 to 19, and we also had a residential care setting as well. And this school, I suppose, a lot of children didn't start out in this school. This school was very much like a place where children would come to after their first sort of maybe mainstream placement broke down, or other special school placement broke down, or also if their home placement broke down. So, we had pretty complex needs in the school. We had a wide range of needs. So we had autism, but we had a lot of sort of secondary or dual diagnosis within the school as well. But it was wonderful. It was really, really, I couldn't have asked for a better start to my career in terms of the learning and the experience.
Did you stay in the NHS, or did you come back home after that, or?
So no, I was there for a few years. I think I was in that role for maybe over 3 years, and then we sort of got the itch to go traveling, my husband and I, and we said, listen, we'll take a year out and we'll come back, and that was sort of the agreement with the school at the time as well. And then we went to Australia, and we were pretty free flowing. We didn't know kind of what we were going to do in Australia, but I had registered with the association, the APRA over there, for OTs in Australia, and I just kind of I couldn't help myself. I wanted to just see what it would be like to work as an OT in Australia. So then I got a job in Sydney, just incredible. So at this point I had done a lot of sort of CPD and training. So I had modules like 1, 2, 3 of my SI done, and I think I had like floor time done, and lots of sensory training. And I came across this clinic like 20-minute walk away, and when I say 20-minute walk, it was the Coogee to Bondi walk. I don't know if you've ever been to Australia, but it's this beautiful, like, idyllic walk, and that was my commute to work every day. And it was a private clinic. It was called Kickstart Kids Therapy, and it was a paediatric clinic, babies, children, teenagers 0 to 18, and with its main approach being SI. I had done SI, I'd done a lot of SI within the school that I was in, but this was a different level. This was the most, like, every room you went into, there were fully equipped SI therapy gyms.
Eavan, can I just for anybody who doesn't know about SI, could you sensory integration, could you just give us a very brief description of that, or what you mean by that?
Yeah, so air sensory integration is an approach. It was developed by wonderful a lady called Jean Ayres in the 70s, and it really, like, when I was studying, it was still not well-known approach within a pediatric OT, but it has grown so much over the years in terms, because we're really getting lots of evidence about its effectiveness now, and a lot of that is coming from the States and Canada as well. But I guess it's a framework in terms of assessment and intervention for children that present with sensory processing difficulties, which are very often secondary to other conditions. So things like autism or ADHD or DCD. So it's an assessment framework, and it's also then an intervention approach that we use. And it's all sort of, it's sort of premises in neuroplasticity, and very much kind of rooted in play, and sort of the intrinsic motivation and the inner drive of the child to be actively involved in the therapy that they're in. And that's what sort of drives neuroplasticity and then therefore therapy outcomes. A lot of work has been done in the years to stay true to what SI really is, because kind of when I was starting out, it was becoming quite trendy, and it was calling SI, saying that they were maybe using SI or doing SI when it was more maybe sensory motor or sensory play or tactile play or whatever we want to call it. There are quite sort of strict rules. So there's a whole fidelity measure on what true SI looks like. And I think that was really, really important in terms of getting lots of evidence. So my husband got a job, and I also got a job as a locum OT in Fermanagh in a new hospital in Enniskillen, and it was as part of a waiting list initiative. And within kind of this service, there was a specialist OT for physical disability, a specialist OT for intellectual disability, and an autism team. But then there was a cohort of children just left to the side, sort of, that were on this waiting list and just were not high on the priority list. And those were our children really struggling, you know, our kids with sort of neurodevelopmental disorders, or DCD, ADHD, sensory process and behavioural motor conditions, that were just not prioritised. So when I finished that, I was sort of looking to get into maybe the HSE or some sort of OT role in Monaghan. We were quite content living at home. But then I sort of realised that it was the same thing was happening in Monaghan, sort of Cavan, my local area as well, where at the time, this is way before PDS, at the time we had no primary care service, so everything was falling under one child development team. The disabilities, the complex disabilities, were taking priority. There was again a cohort of children sitting on a waiting list for up to 4 or 5 years. Again, at the time, autism units were just starting out. I think we had 1 or 2 in Monaghan. So these children were not getting much support anywhere. And then I also was, you know, coming back to a time in my life where my friends were starting to have kids, and my family and my sisters and things like that. And I was like, gosh, like what, you know, there has to be something we can do here. And then one day I just said it. I said it to my husband, my now husband. I just said, I think I'm gonna just set up something. And he was like, yeah, go for it. And that's what I did. So I took my time. It took me a good few months to set it up. And yeah, I opened Thrive in September 2014. And well, that was a journey in itself.
Did you base it on anything, Eavan, any kind of model or service that you worked in? Did you base it on a maybe?
No, to be honest, Eavan, I must admit, I mimicked what we did in Australia. I definitely mimicked. It was brilliant. They did it really, really well. And my manager in Australia mimicked that of places she had worked in London. So we were all sort of, and then changing bits that she wanted to change, and then I was changing bits then that sort of suited the service at home. So the clinical side of things, I felt, you know, confident with. The business side of things, I didn't have a clue. So I did courses with sort of our local enterprise centre on setting up your own business and all that comes with that, because that's a huge part of it and a whole different side to it. We opened our doors, and I never ever anticipated how fast it would grow, how busy it would become. By Christmas time, I had employed my first therapist, and it just sort of rolled from there. At Christmas of that year, we had a 9-month waiting list, and in my head I was like, oh my goodness, this is just as bad. But it wasn't as bad because it wasn't 4 or 5 years. And we got there with it, and it was just a matter of, yeah, there was a lot of learning, a lot of mistakes made for sure, and a lot of learning, and it was great. It was great.
It sounds like you worked in some really dynamic services in London and in Sydney, that were maybe very different to what you saw in Ireland in the HSE. Yeah. Did you feel, you know, was something missing in the HSE? Was there any way that the HSE could have developed what you developed yourself?
You know, I feel like the most simple answer to that is that the only thing missing in the HSE was staff numbers. Honestly, I had never worked in an environment where we struggled with staff and where we were really, really struggling to meet the demand and to meet the needs. We always had very manageable caseloads. And then when I think a massive part of the success of Thrive was the relationship I then had with the HSE therapist in our local. Parents away from them or anything like that, I think they were very grateful for the service, and we worked well together in terms of collaboration and communication and openly discussing what we could do, how we could jointly work together with, I guess, for the best interest of the child. Yeah, I think, listen, it's an ongoing issue. It has always been an ongoing issue. It will be an ongoing issue for a long time, the issue of resources in the HSE.
Great that you were able to fill that gap though, because as you say, there's a cohort in the middle that just don't get the services that they need. And early intervention, as we know, makes such a huge difference in people's lives.
Definitely. And we very much then within Thrive, in terms of the model or the delivery of services we were offering, it was very much home, school, clinic, and they were so intertwined and one didn't work without each other. So it was very we would collaborate with the teachers, the SNA, the parents, the local therapist, and it was that team approach that I think was so key to the success and ultimately the reputation of Thrive. But it also then, I'm talking as if it was all so positive, and it was a really, really positive experience, but there were hard days for sure. And there were things that I just couldn't, I suppose, compete with in a way as well with the HSE in terms of like staff retention and things like that. So that was a huge challenge for me in Thrive, and that was the biggest challenge, aside from kind of like the business management, which was very new to me, but it was the staff retention. I just think with private practice, you can't guarantee or offer the security and the comfort and the predictability that I think the kind of the HSE could have offered. So I found that that was really challenging.
What size of a team did you have, Eavan, at your peak within Thrive?
I had, at my peak, I probably had 7 therapists, 8, and I've such fond memories of it. And so many people who then who seek to sort of set up their own private practice reach out to me and will ask, have you any advice about, kind of and how to do this or how to approach this. And I will always say the same thing to them. And that is to remember why you started, because ultimately in the end, I lost that. There were, in my kind of final months in Thrive, I was spending so many days in the office, and in terms of like hours spent actually working directly with the children compared to hours spent in the office managing people, managing the service, dealing with kind of external agencies and so on. I sort of lost, I lost the real kind of deep passion for what I really wanted to do. And that's not with, I suppose I always try to bring other people in terms of like business management and so on. But it just didn't work out. It just didn't work out. And so it was March 2020. It was just right before COVID that another national organisation acquired it. And I was delighted. I was never going to close it. It was always that someone else, this service would still be here for the families of Monaghan, Cavan, all, kind of surrounding counties. So it's still there. Families are still accessing it, which is wonderful. I'm just not a part of it anymore.
And Eavan, then you moved to the HSE, isn't that right?
I did. So my priorities, I suppose, sort of shifted. I started my own family, and I just couldn't give to Thrive what it needed anymore. And at the time, I don't know if it was fate, but I was on a senior panel, which I did an interview for like years prior, and a senior OT job came up in Monaghan Cab in our local child development team, and it was the first job that had come up in, and I'm going to say about 10 years, it could have been more, and was first on the panel to get it, or to be offered it. And so this was while I still had Thrive, by the way. I thought in my head I might be able to manage both, but again, I didn't know. I just felt like the timing of it, and just kind of how I felt about Thrive at the time in terms of the therapy. I thought this would actually allow me to be a therapist again. So I took it, and I'm still in the team. I'm on a break at the moment, but I'm still in our team, and we have just went through all of the changes, I suppose, with PDS, and I'm in our disabilities team. So we've split up into primary care and disability. So I'm part of the disabilities team.
An amazing journey. And I know you're taking a year out at the moment, and you're doing something that I am in awe of in terms of returning to education, and you are doing a PhD. And I just think anybody who embarks on that marathon is a wonder person, a wonder woman. Tell us about your PhD and what led you to that. Why did you decide to go back and study?
Yeah. You know, it was never really on my radar, and I think this is a recurrent theme. It was never really on my radar to do all of these things, but it was very personally driven, to be completely honest. So my second child, my youngest daughter, was born 2 years ago with a physical disability, and it was a postnatal diagnosis. She was born with a congenital condition called arthrogryposis, and that sort of took us on another detour in itself in terms of kind of life and parenting and all the rest. So she is now in the team, you know, accessing the services of the team, the wonderful team, by the way, absolutely incredible Children's Disability Network team in Monaghan. And I returned to work after she was born part-time, and I just honestly felt just disabilities at home and disabilities at work, and this all-consuming world of disabilities was just a little bit heavy. And I always said I returned to work saying that if I have to sacrifice, or if anything is sacrificed for my daughter, I'm not doing it, because she is my priority. Both my children are my priority, obviously, but I have this really crucial window of time with her in terms of sort of her condition. So I took a break from work to focus on her, and then this opportunity arose to do a PhD, and I wasn't sure, to be honest. I went back and forth with the decision for a while, but it was something that I'm just genuinely very, very interested in as a parent, and obviously as a therapist as well. So the project's called Digitots. And it's very early days. I've just started in the past couple of months, but living the realities of modern day parenting with 2 working parents and so on. It's a matter of occupational balance. It's like, how can we strive for this balance for our children and for our home lives, because we are bringing children into this digital world now, and they are not getting a say in it. They're not getting a choice in it, and they're just exposed. Digital devices are completely normalized within our home environments. I think the average Irish household has 8 digital devices in it, and they're just exposed from birth. And in this sort of digital era, I was actually at a play conference a couple of weeks ago at Glasgow, and it was really interesting because they were talking about the rights of a child and the child's right to play, which we know is so fundamentally important. But they were also talking about, you know, children now are drawn to digital devices as a play choice, and we need to embrace that, and we need to respect it, and we need to use it in a way that will be beneficial for them. Because when you look at the research around digital devices and the impact on development, it's quite scary, and it's all sort of, a lot of the negative associations is sort of looking at something called displacement, and it's like, well, time spent on digital devices takes away from time spent doing other meaningful things. So engaging in physical activity, social interactions, other types of play, for like imagine play, whatever it is. So it's all about achieving, supporting parents to achieve balance, and for us that's occupational balance. So as a parent, I would have loved for this to have been done years ago, so I would know what to do, but I think it's going to be really, really valuable research. And because so a lot of the guidelines out there are very much like no more than 1 hour a day, and for different age groups, and your child must have 60 minutes of vigorous physical activity a day, and things like that. So I hope that we can come up with very realistic, manageable advice and guidelines for parents sort of navigating this digital world, and with some sort of balanced exposure in terms of play opportunities and play choices.
That sounds incredible and so valuable. You know, as a parent, I completely get that dilemma. Like, we've got devices in our household, always have. Time limits on it, absolutely. But then you kind of look at what they're doing with it. So, you know, I've got my daughter, one of them, who does dances. Like, she's not allowed on TikTok, but she does TikTok dances. So she's using the device, but she's also doing a huge amount of physical exercise alongside. So that counts as her time on the device, but it's also physical. So then it's finding that balance. It's all about how you use it. It's a real challenge.
For sure. Yeah.
The project just brings all of you just so nicely together, Eavan. You're a young mom of young children, occupation, you know, and all your experience of in early childhood. It really sums you up. It's a perfect project.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to getting stuck into it. I really am. Now, academics, like, I'm meant to be doing a literature review at the moment. It's been a while since my undergrad thesis. I've done sort of low-level research in my SI in terms of my case studies and things like that, but this is a new challenge in itself. But you know what, it has pleasantly surprised me. I love the flexibility with the process. I have a wonderful supervisor who just gets it, and it's the right fit for my life right now.
And which university are you with, Eavan?
So I'm with the National Research Centre, PEI, a National Research Centre for Psychology, Educational, Emotional Intelligence, which is a substrand of TU Dublin.
Tell us, so just in terms of your family, and you said that your younger daughter was born and has a disability, physical disability, which kind of puts you in a different role, that of maybe a consumer of services rather than a provider of services. What's that shift been like for you?
Yeah, it's been a shift. It's for sure. It's been interesting. We have come sort of into services with a very open mind. It has transformed my thinking as a therapist, I must say. When I first, I guess, became a parent, I thought I was a different therapist. But then when I became a parent of a child with a disability, that completely transformed me again. And as much as I would have liked to think I thought I could resonate with parents and what they were going through, I really don't think until you're going through it yourself, you really, really fully understand what it's like for them. And so I have a whole new, I suppose, way of thinking and feeling for those families going through raising children with disabilities. Listen, I probably underestimated our services at home for kind of the first few months, the first year of my daughter's life, because her condition is so rare. I was thinking, gosh, we need to get to the experts, to the people that really are working with this day in, day out. And it's a population thing in Ireland for sure. So we took her everywhere. So we've been to America, we've been to Texas, Florida, we've been to Poland, London. And you know what? We are right back at home with exceptional therapists, exceptional surgeons. I've a whole new appreciation for all of the negatives that come with our health service, and for all of the kind of bad rap it does get. I have a whole new appreciation for it, and for therapists as individuals who, if you could write down 10 things on paper that you would like them to do for you, if they could, they would. So I have a whole new appreciation for them. Now we're with a few different teams. So we see therapists in the public system, and we see therapists who work privately. And the link between the two is great. And again, that's something that I think I encourage, because that I know the value in that, and I know the benefit in that. It's not, listen, it's not all plain sailing. The journey is not linear by any means, and things change. And when it's going well, we take it and it goes well. But I feel truly really blessed with our experience so far. I really do.
Any advice, any practical tips that you've received on the other side that have made it a really big difference?
So as a parent, I'm going to give this advice, but I also would like to give advice as a therapist as well, because I feel like I'm sort of split into two different roles now. As a parent, and this actually goes both ways, so if there was ever any parents listening as well, I think it's important as well. I would love for therapists to approach the child based on the child that is in front of them and not their diagnosis. And I know we need prior information about conditions and so on, and we need research, and we need evidence, and we need statistics, and we need all that. But again, a very personal example, if you were to read about my daughter on paper, you might read things like, and again, you would assume them secondary to her condition anyway, but you might read things like, absent biceps in right upper limb, or weak elbow flexion, and so on. And functionally, that might translate to, oh, well, she must not be able to feed herself, or she must not be able to brush her teeth, or put on her hat, or whatever it might be. But she can do all of those things. And it's about approaching, it's about you're going into that first sort of meeting, or those first few initial sessions, I think, with a blank page, and just seeing the child, for parking your kind of presumptions, leaving your assumptions at the door, and assuming ability and assuming competence, because I do believe every child deserves that at the very least. And likewise, I would say for parents approaching therapy services and children's teams, you know, this there's been a lot sort of in kind of mainstream social media and stuff about kind of challenges within CDNTs and so on. And again, they're very generalized stories, and they're not everybody's story. So you create your own story, go in with a blank page, give, that creates such a mutual respect. You are a team. You're on the same side here. Your partners, your collaborators. You want the best for this child. So I think if you can go in with those in mind, and not going in kind of on the defense or as a parent, because I do think that can happen. And as therapists, just assume that this child has the ability and has competence, and don't presume based on their condition or what you may have read that this will be the case for this child.
So open-mindedness, Eavan, on both sides.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think sometimes we can get defensive both ways.
Yeah,
you
for
know,
sure.
that, this is a problem. And if you're going in with assuming that everybody is doing their best that they can, given the circumstances that they're working in or that they're parenting in, that's a really good basis for a relationship.
And just in terms of, I know you talked about the words of wisdom, Aideen, as a therapist, so I feel like that's from just being a parent of a child with a disability, but as a therapist, I think as pediatric therapists, this is our bread and butter. Like this is our complete. This should be our day in, day out with whatever child we are working with, whatever the ability of the child, we need to bring it back to play. And I say that because I have tried and failed the prescriptive sort of therapy regimented strategies with my daughter, and we go nowhere. And in terms of sort of, so obviously it's a mother-daughter attachment in that regard, but in terms of the therapist-child relationship and rapport, there will be nothing that will create a better relationship than done through play. And again, it's about remembering that play is very subjective. Sorry, what we view as play may not be what the child experiences as play, and it has to be obviously so meaningful to the child. But if my daughter thinks back and remembers that myself and her dad just played with her, then I will be very, very, very happy. And then it's just obviously about incorporating the therapeutic strategies within that. And playfulness is important for everyone. It's important for us as therapists. We all adults need to play too. It's so important. And I think with everything that goes on in terms of kind of the work environment and some of the kind of situations we find ourselves in with frustration and stress, lack of control over certain things, particularly in the public system, I think we forget that. Actually, we can enjoy this. We need to enjoy it, and there is nothing better for me anyway, and I'm sure for so many paediatric therapists, than playing with a child. There's nothing better.
Play is where the magic happens.
Absolutely.
What a brilliant note to finish on, Eavan.
Eavan, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. We really appreciate it. It's really insightful.
Oh, no, thank you very much.
That's all for today's episode on the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast. We hope you enjoyed our discussion and found it informative and engaging. If you've any questions or comments, we would love to hear from you. You can email us at irishotpodcast@gmail.com or connect on Instagram or Facebook.
And remember to subscribe to our podcast so that you never miss an episode. If you found this episode helpful, please leave us a review on your preferred podcast platform. Your feedback is important and helps us to improve the show, so please do leave it. Thank you for listening to the Irish Occupational Therapy podcast, hosted by myself, Jen Trechek.
And myself, Aileen Rutledge.
We look forward to sharing more insights and knowledge with you in future episodes. Until then, take care.